We're breaking down offense again here. This is a position preview for the running back room. And this can get dicey and be debated at length about who's going to get the touches. Is Gus Malzahn going to consolidate behind one bell cow of a back, or are they going to be sharing the load across a lot of different skill sets? This is a fun one to sort through, Ira, because Florida State has veteran guys that maybe we expected one or two to perhaps transfer, true freshmen that has been very, very heralded that won't be here in spring, but I don't think it matters when it comes down to it for the fall. How did you sort through this when you put together the piece on the way too early depth chart for the running backs?
Yeah, I mean, I think the thing you said at the beginning there is really the key to it. I think Gus Malzahn, if you look at him in his track record, he does usually identify that lead running back, and they're going to ride that guy and let him get into a rhythm. And, there's nothing wrong with carrying the ball 25, 27 times a game. And, that's the way teams used to operate. Then you've kind of gone to a time where a lot of running backs and, obviously their families and everyone else talks about the tread on their tires, and you don't want to run a running back into the ground the way maybe a Nick Saban did at times at Alabama, where his backs looked so great in college, but then couldn't really do much in the NFL. And that's a concern. You want to keep that in mind. But man, if there's a clear delineation between your top running back and maybe your top two running backs and everybody else, you don't have to just keep everybody happy. And I think that's where Florida State's been the last few years. I really feel like, David Johnson, Florida State's running backs coach, really loves his guys. And I think he believes in his guys. And Mike Norvell, we know how much he believes in his players. And I think they would like to give all those guys touches. I think that's going to be the biggest change we see this year. I really think it's going to be one guy, and this is, from things I'm hearing around the program, there's going to be a guy who when they win the job, they're going to be carrying the load. And then you'll get into situations where maybe you need to go with a different back because of their skill set in different situations. But for the most part, you're going to have a lead guy. And to me, based on what we've seen so far, and based on what I've seen and heard about Usman Kromah from his high school days, I think there's a good chance he may be the guy. And I know he's not going to be here in spring. I get it. But it's a running back. You don't have to, it's not all that complicated for a running back. And so if he fits in this offense, which I think Gus Malzahn is very excited about having him, I think he could be the guy. But as you said, man, they've got a lot of other options. I just don't know how dynamic the other every down back type guys appear to be. I mean, we just didn't see a ton of dynamic plays from Cam, Roydell, Keziah Holmes. I mean, you got some home run hitters in the young guys, but to me, I think Kromah is going to end up being the guy.
Yeah, I'll go through these in little packets here, but we'll start with the veterans in Keziah Holmes, Roydell Williams. I suppose if they get the sense, it's hard because Kromah's not going to be here in spring camp to assert himself. But if they do get the sense, or maybe there's a communication behind the scenes, maybe some of these guys might, enter the portal in the spring window to get more touches elsewhere. But in their final years, both Keziah Holmes and Roydell Williams, Ira, I was a huge fan of Keziah. I thought he had a nice spring, and I thought he did a little bit of everything that Florida State wanted, from pass protection to decent vision and timing, good burst and good toughness. He only had 15 carries last year. So, I mean, didn't parlay into much, and down the stretch, he had a couple of nice runs. And I remember people asking in the game threads on the Tribal Council, "Hey, what about him?" And I was jumping up and down saying, "I know, it's been a frustrating room, and it was last year." I think a lot of that has to do with the offensive line, but two veteran guys with 1 year left, if neither of them is going to be the guy, this might be a tough place to be in their final year of eligibility.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's fair. And like you said, though, the fact that Kromah won't be here in the spring leaves there's nobody could say that's set in stone that he's going to be the guy. So yeah, everybody's going to feel like it's a wide open competition. And I don't think anybody in that room is going to just shut it down to where it's clear that they're the guy. Keziah Holmes is a mystery. He had, was it a fumble? I know he had a bad play last year, and it seemed like that when that happened, man, he didn't see the field again for several games. And I don't know if that was Mike Norvell. I don't know if that was David Johnson, but it just seemed like that was kind of the end of the road for him for a while. And I also think they wanted to see, I think they really believed in Cam Davis, and you had Lawrence Toafili. It's not like Toafili was carrying it a ton, and he's a good back. The problem is you couldn't get into games. You couldn't run the ball. they could not run the ball with anybody. So I just feel like they just stuck with the main, they were limited at bats
Yep.
because of how bad the offensive line was, and then they just got lost in the shuffle. But I do think Keziah's got potential. But yeah, I don't know, man. At this point, uh, I am surprised. Like you said, I'm a little bit surprised that those guys are deciding to come back because there's definitely no guarantee that they're going to play a lot.
Yeah, this is one thing where I don't know that the Gus Malzahn hire excites me on a football level where I go, oh, here you go, it's new and exciting. But one thing I love about Gus Malzahn is if he does find a guy, he will use that guy over and over again. It's not just the running back position; he'll do that at receiver as well. If there are playmakers or dudes that he thinks can run his offense the best, he didn't care about rotation. And last year that drove me nuts. So one of the positives will be hopefully that there is somebody who can lead the pack. Of the next group of guys, I'm going to call these the speedsters. We'll start with Mekhi Danzy. Wow, can he fly? And we saw that for some moments last year. A couple of wheel routes that he wasn't thrown to that just take your breath away. Sam Singleton. And then Jalen Lucas, who looked like he was going to be not just fast, but also gritty, tough, could break some tackles, and it just ended all too soon. Jalen Lucas is a name that gets totally lost in the shuffle, Ira. Again, another guy that, he can run and fly too.
No, it really does. And he's a guy that we were so excited about last year because once we saw him in the spring, I mean, he had nice numbers at Indiana. Not just as a return guy, he's known as a return guy because he had the long kickoff returns for touchdowns, but he also was a really good running back and a really good pass catcher. I think his last year at Indiana, I think he had 30 plus catches, a good number of catches. So he's a guy that can help you in a lot of different ways. And we loved what we saw in the spring and then preseason camp. And then the first game, Mike Norvell basically made it sound like he kind of forgot about him, wasn't making a point to get him in the game. And then in the second game, he ends up getting hurt. So we didn't get to see it. Unfortunately, he's coming back from a knee injury. So, we'll have to see what he looks like this spring. If he's able to do anything until the summer, we'll see how that plays out. But yeah, he's a really nice weapon. And Mekhi Danzy, man, if, anybody that's been fortunate enough to see him in practice, and we saw glimpses in games, but if you saw him in practice, I mean, it is electric. And what you saw in those games is his speed is not normal football speed. Like, there are fast football guys, and then there's legit track speed, and that's what he has. I mean, he's going to be running track for FSU's track team. And so what you see when he runs those wheel routes is the defensive backs don't know how to judge how fast he's going to be. They don't know when to turn and start running. And by the time they do, he's already gone by them. And so, man, if you get the ball to him in space, I know he's not, an all-around football player yet. He's still got to get stronger. He's still got to get more physical. He's got to develop. But, man, that speed is unreal. So, yeah, you want to see him get used. And then Sam Singleton also has really good speed, too. He had the kickoff return for a touchdown last year. We've seen him break off a couple of nice runs. He's another guy that will be interesting in a new offense with a new offensive coordinator. Maybe he hits a different level than we've seen so far.
And then the last two guys, we've talked about them already, but Cam Davis, more of a battering ram type. There were a couple of runs last year. I remember one might have been Cal, might have been Memphis. He moved the pile 4 or 5 yards after, in one of those ACC specials where the referees just let it keep going. And you think the play's dead, and then the pile just moves and moves. And I'm pretty sure that was just because of the leg strength of Cam Davis, because it didn't look like he was getting assisted as though it was a 3rd and 1 in Philadelphia. He's a battering ram that, again, I saw it in the chat. It's hard to assess. It's a freshman in his first game action. The speed of the game's different. He was coming off of playing quarterback. The O-line's bad. Some people have been critical of Cam. I'd say, hold on a minute. Let's see what we got here. 225 already as a sophomore. And then Chroma, who has a bit of a different, awkward running style, but is explosive, sees angles that guys don't. I guess if you're handicapping this, Ira, I'm looking at the chart that you have on the page here on warchant.com, the article. But these two guys might be the top two when it all comes down to it in the fall.